And of course, the problem is that if Macron doesn't get that, it doesn't have to be a landslide, it just needs to be a simple majority in the Assembly, he risks being stymied going forward. What does that mean for Macron's next 5 years, and how does that shape what happens in Europe? Of course, the relationship between France and Germany, very central to that. Macron expected to visit Olaf Scholz very, very shortly, and here to discuss what might go on between those two gentlemen. We have Joseph de Weck, as author of Emmanuel Macron, der revolutionäre Präsident. Sorry for slaughtering the German pronunciation of your book, sir. The revolutionary president, I think, is possibly the way to translate it. Macron and Scholz, how important is it that they see eye to eye going forward regarding the future of Europe?
I think it's very important, and with Scholz and Macron, there are really two people that in reality think quite alike when it comes to Europe. If you look at Scholz's campaign for the Bundestag, when he got elected Chancellor, European sovereignty was one of the key themes, and European sovereignty was the big theme Macron launched in 2017 at his Sorbonne speech. So they think about the same way in Europe. They have the same sort of direction to go to. And they also both believe that crises are to some extent also moments where you can break taboos and, make integration steps forward. It was Scholz who was finance minister in the Grand Coalition under Merkel who was pushing for the European recovery plan at the time. So he's not only someone who thinks in terms of Europe similarly to Macron, but at times is also willing to take risks.
So is this going to be a change from what we saw between Macron and Angela Merkel?
I think so. Merkel was not an anti-European, but she didn't have a strong idea of where Europe should go to. She was more of a status quo politician. She thought that Europe was great as it was, but she didn't really see an urgency that Europe should go much further. And Olaf Scholz, he has this vision. He has this idea that for Germany to exist, Europe needs to go further, needs to integrate more, and Europe needs to be able to have its own role and voice in foreign and defense policy, also to protect its economy. So in terms of thinking, I think the two are more forward-looking.
So what are we talking about? A European army?
Well, a European army is always the big thing, but what we're seeing definitely is Olaf Scholz again taking a crisis and making a decisive step by massively increasing the spending on defense in Germany. And this doesn't lead immediately to a European army, but it means that there's more money available for sort of European defense projects, tanks, fighter jets, everything else, drones. And it means that Germany is very slowly moving towards a position where it has to accept and acknowledge that defense plays an important role. And so far, this was always something dividing France and Berlin.
Now, on that very issue, if we talk about Ukraine, it's taken Germany some time to sort of get onto the same page as other NATO allies regarding what should be done there. Is this going to be a point of difference, do you think?
Absolutely. I think Germany they were ahead of the curve and then they were behind the curve again. And today is possibly a day where they're trying to catch up again. Habeck, for example, saying that they're ready for an oil embargo. But generally, I think that Scholz and Macron in this crisis see eye to eye in the sense that they believe Europe has to play a role. And that Europe needs to have, a seat at the table at the negotiation that will come at some point when this war is over. And I think both Macron and Scholz have realized that they have to apply pressure on Russia for it to stop. But both are also scared of escalation.
Indeed.
So,
as indeed, I think everybody is scared of escalation.
Yeah.
Perhaps even Vladimir Putin might even be deep down scared of escalation, even though his actions tend to actually sort of be the actual opposite. Macron's been criticised by some for maintaining a conversational relationship by phone with Putin. Is that something Scholz would actually support him in doing? Would Scholz want to be part of that?
Yeah, I think Scholz wouldn't criticize him at all for doing this. In the end, what matters is less sort of do you talk to Putin, but are you solid on the sanctions front and are you solid on the threats? And I think Paris and Macron have been more or less solid on this issue. And afterwards, there are pros and cons for talking to Putin. Some people say at least you know what he's thinking. Others think, but you're giving him some sort of sense of normalcy, which is
gives him a sense of credibility, doesn't it? A sense of actually being part of an international conversation when in fact he isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think some people have said about Macron that he's allowed himself to be kind of played, used in that way by Putin.
Yes, but Russia is a nuclear power, and I think that's a major thing. And ultimately, we're in a situation where there is a possible escalation. It looks like a small risk, but capping all contacts with the head of a country that has a nuclear power and that has somehow threatened using it is probably not a wise choice. Better be sure.
Okay, so it's very clear that Macron and Scholz will have much to talk about when they get together, whenever that happens. We're told it's happening very, very shortly, very soon. One thing Macron mentioned in his pre-election debate when he was head-to-head with Marine Le Pen is that he was talking about reforming the Schengen zone within Europe. Is this something that Scholz might be on board with too, sort of changing the actual nuts and bolts about sort of the free access Schengen zone?
Yeah, I mean, Germany would be definitely on board with this. But when it comes to Schengen and migration and sort of distributing incoming refugees, Germany has always been in favor of that. It's mostly the Eastern Europeans who have been against this. So now in this current situation with Poland taking most refugees from Ukraine, possibly there is an opening there.
Indeed. And in terms of what happens in the way that migration is dealt with, because it's been one of the major issues that Europe has had to face over the past 5 years, hasn't it? And one of the things that many people say Europe has failed on, how it's handled the migration crisis and various aspects of that and various manifestations of dealing with migration. Would these two men agree on what happens next in how policies should be enforced? Or will there be disagreement between the two? Because obviously Germany, over the Syrian migrant crisis, for instance, Angela Merkel was very open door until it became, of course, too much.
Yes, but Angela Merkel was very open door at first, but afterwards it was also her that negotiated the cynical deal with the Turkish President Erdogan to keep all refugees, on Turkey. So her refugee or record on migration, is very mixed. And I think in the last 2-3 years of Merkel's chancellorship, you have seen her go to a very mainstream European position that is in line with France. I think if there are disputes between Paris and Berlin, it's more going to be about money, and this will certainly come. That's part of the conversation.
Indeed, money, the big question, of course. Yeah. And that's where the two men might be at loggerheads, do you think?
Yes, I mean, I think what is sure is if you're serious about European sovereignty, you need to be able to spend. You need to be able to spend, to exit Russian energy, to have more investments in European technology and defense. And I think Macron, this is what he's going to push with new legitimacy as once again elected president. And he has a lot of allies now because the situation has changed. The Nordics, they see the reason for defense happening, for exiting quickly out of energy. Some Eastern European countries also now see a reason for doing this. So I think this is the debate that we're going to have over the next couple of months.
Indeed, I was going to ask you about energy, but we run out of time because obviously Germany having closed its nuclear park, France expanding its nuclear park, it creates a whole different dynamic as well with that one. But sadly, no time. Joseph de Weck, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your analysis of the situation. Author of the book Emmanuel Macron, The Revolutionary President. It's German titled Revolutionäre Präsident. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us, Joseph de Weck.
Thank you for having me.
We take a very short break. After that, the news continues here live from Paris. Stay with us.